Wow. Okay. So how did you go from video editing, shooting video too, or just editing? Shooting
Yep.
and editing video to government contracts. That's
That's
I don't know, maybe
it's
to
a
me,
huge
maybe it's
leap.
just me, but it seems like the Grand Canyon.
You know, it's definitely a huge leap. So first, let me say, when I went to school for business, I went to school for business and communications and broadcast. So I have a bunch of overrated degrees and stuff like that. But when I went to school, I was taught in business, it takes 2 to 5 or 3 to 5 years to turn a profit, and you have to have startup capital, and you have to go get business loans. You have to do all these things. So I really believe that. So when I first started my production company, I built it that way, and I built my production company off what I heard was a bootstrap budget, right? You take a little bit of money and you invest it and you reinvest it and all those things. So it was really hard the first few years, like first 5 years in business. Like I barely was making ends meet. I barely was making like 15 to 20,000 a year, but I was working like 50 to 60 hours chasing customers, right? And I said, this got to be a better way. Like after so much time, I was like, it's got to be a better way than this, right? But it wasn't until like I had been married before, and I was on the verge of getting a divorce. Of course, those types of things happen, and I was trying to figure out how was I going to be able to pay my bills off $15,000 to $20,000 a year. I wasn't going to be able to do that and provide for my children. And so I had heard from one of the first Black billionaires that I had met personally that how you build a business is by selling to the government. I said, well, what do you mean by that? Like, I don't sell weapons. I don't, because that's
right.
What
What do you think? Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like, but I had asked him because I was like, because I was freelancing. I had started freelancing, and that's how I was making the 15 to 20,000. I was freelancing for other small businesses, building out their portfolio, doing videos and photography stuff for them. And so he really just told me. I said, well, how did you become the billionaire? Right? Most people don't want to ask a person of who's successful, how did you do it? Because in our culture, or at least in my culture or community, like that's like you don't ask that. It's taboo. You don't ask a person how they did it, right? But you know what? I was just so sick and tired of trying to figure things out and working my fingers to the bone, and had nothing to show for it. And here I had like 3 children, my son, and about to get a divorce. My son was getting ready to, he basically had holes at the bottom of his shoes, and I was like, I can't provide. And that was like one of the biggest like grief moments for me. Like I can't even do nothing for my son because I got all these bills and all this stuff. And so for me, I asked him. Right, that's what gave me the courage.
Yeah,
to
taboo
ask
or
him,
no taboo. I need to put some shoes on my baby.
How did you do it? And so he looked at me, he gave me a serious look, and he said, "These are the words that literally changed my life." He said, "The same thing that you're doing for me, you can do it for the government and make tons of money doing it." I said, "What do you mean by that?" Right? He said, well, don't you know you do photography services and you do video services? There are $1 trillion projects where they have to use women-owned businesses or minority businesses and small businesses like yours. I said, okay. So I actually made the commitment to myself to go learn everything about that, because for me, I needed to change my life and I needed to do it sooner rather than later.
Isn't it interesting how sometimes like being in enough pain is the exact catalyst you need to take your life to another level.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like to me, like if you wouldn't have been in that situation where you're going through a divorce, you can't put shoes on your children, you can't pay your bills, you're making $20,000 a year, not a month, a year.
Yeah.
15, 20,000 a year. It sounds like if you hadn't gone through that situation, you may not have even had enough intestinal fortitude to ask him that question.
I was playing. Like I wouldn't have had enough to just to ask that question, but also I felt like I was playing in business because I wasn't I really wasn't serious enough, right? Because I was still running around chasing customers, doing the things that I knew didn't work, and I was doing them anyway, right? And so that's why I came to the conclusion back then that regardless of what situation I'm going through, I learned to trust God, right? I said I would start telling myself, God, I trust you. I don't understand the season that I'm in. I don't understand what I'm going through or how or why I'm going through it, but I trust you, and I know that you told me when I was a child, you spoke to my spirit that I was going to be great. Like there's greatness within me, and I'm ready. So I start having those types of conversations with myself rather than, oh, woe is me.
Come on now.
Oh, they don't have anything for me. Oh, they won't allow me to get this loan because my credit is bad. And like all these different things that we can talk about why the world is set up or basically is set up to keep you out or keep minority or black and brown people out of wealth, right? I could have used all those excuses, and I did for a long time, but it wasn't until I came to the realization that I have to be the one to make something happen for myself.
Go ahead with your bad self. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. So you decided you're going to go into government contracts. You researched everything on your own. And so it sounds like you dove in. You got out of the, okay, I've got a degree. So you got out of the formal education swimming pool into the self-education swimming pool.
Yes, it's crazy.
And you got into that pool and you started learning.
Yeah.
And you applied what you learned.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually so when I started self-educating myself, it all came full circle to me. The things about what I learned in school, I felt like that's a lie. And the things about like what I learned about Christopher Columbus discovering America, I'm like, that's a lie. I'm like, if all of these things that we've been taught by society is a lie, then I need to learn more truths. And that's when I went into self-study mode. And what I discovered was it does not take 2 to 5 years to build a business. You can be highly profitable in your first 30, 60, 90 days if 100%. You're selling to the right person.
100%.
And what I learned about the government is they're obligated. They already have this money, pools of money, like we're talking about multiple trillions of dollars that they've already earmarked to spend with entrepreneurs, right? That's the only way to get the money is if you have a business. Like, you know,
say less. You had me at hello.
So instead of chasing customers, here's a customer who's already chasing you. They've already raised their hand and say, hey, come get this
I've got all this money.
Come get it.
I want to pay you, especially, I want to pay you if you're an entrepreneur, if you have a business, a small business, number one. Number two, if you're run by a minority. Number three, if you're run by a woman. Number four, if you're run by a person with a disability. I want to pay you. Any one of those, great. All four of those, your chances are better than anybody else's. That's how it sounds to me.
That's exactly what it is. I started checking those boxes. And then, so I started actually, initially, when I first heard of it, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway. All the mistakes I've learned from, right? So for everyone that's, you know, there's a lot of times I hear about people, oh, I tried this and it doesn't work. Well, you have to keep trying until you figure out how to make it work. And so for me, it took a couple years for me to continue trying to get the no's. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? So I start going back and repeating and rinsing, repeating and moving some things around until I finally landed my first contract which literally changed my life. And it happened like the day I signed my divorce papers, it was like final, right? Like 2 days later, it was like, here's the $70,000 contract for the 28 days of work that you're going to do for us, taking photos, right? And I was
taking photos with pictures with a camera.
And taking photos. And it was like 2 hours on site, 28 days, $70,000. That's 56 hours. So it was what I was making in a year when I was working for a corporation, right? Working 40-hour work weeks and overtime, replace that in a 28-day period working for myself and selling to the right customer.
Woo!